thing that we want to talk about is that etiquette is a part of your personal brand. It's a part of how you interact. And if we talk a little bit about what etiquette is about, it's basically simply respect. And respect in terms of learning more about how you interact with folks, in terms of interview meals, luncheons, receptions, and opportunities for you to really engage with others. So it's a big part of your personal brand. Everything, as we talked about the model this morning, all of these things go together as a part of your brand. I'm going to skip over that so we can get this in and talk about meal service. We're going to have a buffet meal today, and many times when you go to an event, you may find that as it is today, they will preset some of your meal. So some of your meal today is the salad and it's the dessert, okay? And one of the things, if you sit down at a round table, you may say, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to sit and what my silverware is. And there is a simple way to look at it. If you hold your left hand up and make a B with your left hand, all right? On your left side, there is a bread plate, all right? So the B on your left hand goes, and that tells you that's your bread plate because it's on the left. If you make a D with your right hand, your drink is on your right. So B and D. Some people have added an M in the middle for main, which would mean that your main dish would be in the middle. Some people have changed it to BMW for bread, meat, and water. So, but the idea with it is your bread is on your left and your drink will be on your right, okay? That helps you when you sit down at an interview luncheon of this type, okay? We'll also talk a little bit about some formal settings and some informal settings. A couple of things that happen is sometimes employers like to have an interview process where they want to get to know all parts of you. They want to know how you introduce yourself, how you act in an interview, but how you might act in front of their customers as well. And so they're trying to look at the total package. And a way to do that is to help you help them learn more about you via that particular event. It could be a reception, and many employers use some type of networking reception where there's food. Some will use lunches. Some will use a dinner. Maybe that might actually be for a full-time position. It might be the way they actually decide if you're going to be the candidate. So everything is important. And it's important just to have confidence. One of the major supporter of the University of Memphis is Mr. David Wedeman. And Mr. David Wedeman is one of our alumni in the accounting area. And when he was interviewing for jobs, one of the things he said, I got all ready for the interview and I could answer things about an actual question, and they took me out to dinner. And when they took me out to dinner, there was a fork at the top of my plate. And he said, I had never seen a fork and a spoon at the top of my plate. And I got so nervous about the spoon and the fork, I forgot how to answer the interview questions. And so he's a real proponent of supporting the development of students in that way. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way, I'm sorry. Here we go. Buffet meal service. One of the things you want to remember is that when you go to a buffet is that you take appropriate portions. You will eat again. This will not be the last supper, okay? You will eat again. And so you want to make sure that not only you choose appropriate portions, but you also choose foods that are carefully so that they're easy to eat. For instance, if on the buffet they have corn on the cob, that might be your favorite food, but it might not be the best food for you to choose during an interview lunch. You want to make sure that you follow the host's lead. If it happens to be something that they have, this is somewhere they take people often. And one of the things that you want to make sure that you avoid comments that might be considered derogatory, such as, this would have been great if they had had ranch dressing. Okay, that's actually part of the learning thing today. I know that ranch dressing is a favorite, but we're actually doing something that might be more typical to what you would have been served at an actual restaurant meal. Quick thing about the serving size, and then we're going to start on our salads. Quick quiz. Who can tell me how you decide which fork and spoon you use? Okay, how about you over here? Stand up and tell us your name. Excellent. I don't know if you heard her answer, but she was absolutely right. You start at the outside and work your way in. So if you look at your setting right now, if we do that, then that means we will be starting with the smaller fork on your left side. Now, the first thing that you do before you start eating, before they bring you any food, and ours is a little bit different today because I was trying to get everybody seated, is that the very, 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 very first thing is you always put your napkin in your lap. So let's go ahead and do that. And when you take your napkin, the fold part of this is what goes up onto your lap this way. And some people will even tell you to turn the little flap over just a little bit so that it gives you another way to kind of use it just for your fingertips. So you're going to put this into your lap. What you don't do, guys, is what? No, putting it in up here. Okay? All right, so you want to put your napkin in your lap. Now, the napkin may be in several different places. It could be actually in a beverage glass. It might make it look really pretty. It might be here on top of your plate, or it might be to the side as it was on your particular setting today. But that's always the first thing. One thing that you want to also get in the habit of doing is when you are doing this, make sure that you watch what everybody else is doing. And I often see students just forget about the napkin, and that's because y'all have been eating at Chick-fil-A and Subway and Taco Bell, and nobody has really had to remind you about that, okay? All right, now if you notice, there's the 13 and the 14. Who can tell me what 13 and 14 are for? Dessert, that's right. And so if you were to see that at a meal, you just leave that alone until it's time for dessert, and then it will be pulled down either by your waiter or they will expect you to do that. And then number 1 is the bread plate, and then in here, this particular meal, this also kind of gives you an idea of how many courses you're going to have, and it will help you understand that. We don't have as many utensils today because we have to get you in and out. And so what I want you to do now, since you've got your napkin in your lap, as soon as I stop talking, you'll start the dressing at the table around, and you're going to pass it to your right. And everybody serves some dressing. The person closest to the roll basket, please take your roll. And when you take your roll, what I want you to do is you're going to not put it on your salad plate. You are going to actually put it on your bread plate, okay? And if you were to use butter, I'm not sure if we have butter on the tables today or not, but at Grandma's house, when she serves wonderful hot Southern biscuits, we want the butter to melt all over it. Well, in an interview luncheon, what you would do is you would break it into bite-sized pieces, and you would leave it on your butter plate and just butter a little bit at a time. So what we're going to do today, and if y'all can switch to the hand position, it's there? Okay. One thing to tell you a little bit with salads is that a lot of restaurants don't cut their lettuce into small pieces. So you may think, I don't need to use a knife with my lettuce. Well, you might, because it may be too much to put in your mouth. So you're going to take this, and notice how I have my hand. I have my index finger, and I have my fork turned over like this, and I have my knife with my index finger. Everybody kind of get in the same position. We're going to do this together. And what you want to do is put the tines of the fork in a piece of lettuce and go ahead and begin to cut it a little bit. And you cut a few bites at a time. And when you get done cutting and you're ready to eat it, you're going to put your knife at the top and you're going to transfer your fork to your other hand. If you're right-handed, you will transfer it to your right hand. Now, before you actually start eating and I stop talking, this is what you don't do, okay? This is one of the don't do's. You are not hunting, okay? So you do not have to stab and you do not have to saw, okay? So how you hold your utensils are very important, and it helps to show class. So everybody, just one more time, let's just practice this. You're going to have your index finger on the fork, the small fork. You're going to have your index finger on the knife, and you're going to cut small pieces. And make sure that they are bite-sized pieces because you want it to go into your mouth gracefully, okay? All right, any questions on that point? When you use a utensil, you do not put the utensil back on the table. You find some way to place it here. So this is how your fork and your knife should look. The knife should be at the top and the fork should be here, okay? All right, questions? Okay, we're going to have a few minutes where you eat your salad, then I will start telling you a little bit more. So, bon appetit. Elizabeth, put her with one of the education. If you'll look this way, I want to give you one other little piece of instruction because some of you are finishing your salads. When you get totally finished with your salads, you are going to put your fork at the kind of the bottom of your plate. Mine's got salad on it, so but you're going to put it like at the 4 o'clock place, and you're going to put your knife on the bread plate. And it's resting. It's going to wait for you to go and get the rest of your meal, okay? And I just want to tell you just a little bit about the informal table setting. Occasionally you might be invited somewhere where you won't have as many different places as you might have, or as many different utensils, and it might look more this way. Same thing, your fork's going to be on the left, and your drink is going to be on your right. All right. If we can play we'll do this and then they'll be done with their salads. If you can play the video, this is a really good video that's going to show you a little bit of a kind of efficient way about this. If you can look at one of the two screens.
Hello, I'm Nancy Mitchell with the Etiquette Advocate, and we are talking about dining etiquette. We're going to talk now about the placement and the use of utensils. Utensils are set in the order that they will be used according to the courses that are on the menu. Going from the outside in toward your main service plate. Spoons and knives are on the right, forks are on the left. This place setting would tell me that my first course is going to be soup, and this is the grip that I would use on a spoon. A spoon is held like a pencil. We'll talk in a minute about eating a soup course. There are two grips to remember about using a knife. A knife can be used as a cutting implement where your index finger is placed on the joint between the handle of the knife and the blade of the knife, and it is used to cut something like meat, the entree, vegetable. A fish fork is the only exception to that rule. If there is a fish knife in your place setting, that knife is held like a pencil. That grip is to ensure that you'll be able to remove bones, skin, whatever is part of your fish course. There are two styles of dining. There is the American style of dining and the European style of dining. The United States is probably the only culture in the world where we switch our fork and knife after we've made a cut and we're trying to eat the food that we've cut. To demonstrate, in the United States, we will hold our knife and fork in this fashion, pivot our wrists, make the cut, place our knife to the top of our plate, switch the fork to our right hand if we're right-handed, and take the bite that we've just cut. And we do this switching back and forth many, many times throughout a meal. European dining means that you are using the same grip for the utensils. You've made the one cut at a time, but you leave the knife in your right hand, you pivot your left hand, the food comes to your mouth. Your wrists are resting on the edge of the table. You do not need to put your knife and fork down between bites. The only time you do put them down is when you are going to take a drink of a beverage or you're going to have a bite of your bread. Let's talk for a minute about something called the silent service code. If you are dining American fashion or European fashion, there are messages that you can send to the wait staff that let them know where you are in the progress of your meal. If I'm dining American fashion, I am going to be cutting one bite at a time. When I need to take a break to take a beverage or to leave the table for some reason, I am going to place my knife and fork in such a way that there is a space between them. They're on the right side of my plate. I'm sending a message to the wait staff that I am not finished with this course. Please don't clear it away. If I'm dining American fashion and I am completely finished, I'm going to line my knife and my fork up on my plate in what's called the 10-20 position. If you envision your plate as the face of a clock, the tines of the fork and the point of the knife are going to be pointing to 10 o'clock on the face of the clock. The handles are pointing to 20 past the hour on the clock. They're parallel, they're close together, they're sending this message to the wait staff, I'm completely finished with this course, you may clear it. Now let's talk briefly about the European style of dining. Again, the grip on the silverware is the same, but the difference is I am not going to be putting my knife down and switching my fork back to my right hand between each and every bite. I'm going to be making that cut. I'm going to be pivoting my left hand to bring that bite to my mouth. I have my elbows very close to my body. I have my wrists resting on the edge of the table. And I continue in this fashion until I need to take a sip of a beverage or I'll leave the table for some reason. At that point, I'm dining European style. I am going to crisscross my knife and my fork to send again this silent service code to the wait staff that I am not finished with this course, please don't clear it away. When I am completely finished after having dined in the European fashion, again I will use this 10-20 position on the clock, if you will, and I will lay my knife and my fork parallel in that position with the tines of the fork down. This indicates that I've been dining in the continental fashion. We'll next talk about glassware.
To watch the other segments in this video series or for how-to videos on almost any other topic, visit monkeyseed.com.
Just a second, we're going to start the buffet process. I wanted to talk a little bit about the message about the napkin as well. When you first sit down, you put your napkin in your lap, as we've talked about. When you get up, and we're about to get up, and we're going to do it kind of in an organized fashion so that some of you can keep talking and finishing up. But what you want to do is you want to have your napkin in your chair when you have to leave the table, either to let you go to the buffet, like we'd be doing, or if you have to excuse yourself and go to the ladies' or men's room, that's okay. Ladies, when you are using a cloth napkin, you want to make sure that you put your index finger right here, and then you're going to do this to actually wipe your mouth. And the reason for that is most of us wear lipstick, and much of the time the napkins are going to be white, and so you don't want your lipstick all over the white napkins, right? And so that's kind of a part of that, and it's just kind of a ladylike thing to do. If you happen to have gum in your mouth or whatever, what you would do with a paper napkin, you do not do with a cloth napkin, okay? That's just a general rule of thumb. Okay, so if you need to get rid of gum, try to do that before you go into the restaurant or whatever. Okay, now if you notice where my knife is, it's at the top of my bread and butter plate right here. we're not going to, what they said in the video is normally when there's going to be someone who comes and almost resets your table service for you. We won't have that at UM Cafe today because we don't have that extensive staff to be able to do that, and we'll do it this way. So you want to have your fork at the 10:20 mark. Some people call it 4:20. It's 10:20, but this shows that I'm done, and your wait staff will begin to pick it up. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to stand up, and I'm going to pretend I'm going to the buffet. I'm going to put my napkin in my chair, which is what you all should do. And what I want us to do is, Dennis, your table will go first. And what you have for lunch today, we have a lovely chicken dish, some nice oven roasted potatoes, and some very nice green beans. So follow what we talked about in terms of portion control. This table will go first, and then Stephen, your table will go, and then Chris, your table, and then Jamal, your table. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in one door and out the other. So we're giving you lots of steps to remember, okay? The reason we're doing this, and everybody else just continue talking, and we'll just keep the process going until everybody gets served, okay? All right, Mike, Stephen? So continue the same grip, and when you cut your piece of chicken, just cut a bite at a time. And these are some nice oven roasted potatoes. A lot of times if you're used to eating fries, you might eat those with your fingers, but there are no finger foods on this plate, okay? So you want to make sure that you cover that. These are pretty large wedges of potatoes, so you want to make sure that you cut those. And if for some reason you're at a restaurant and your meat or whatever you're eating is a little bit tough, just like go gingerly with it and just kind of easily try to continue cutting just a little bit more. And you certainly don't want to say, wow, that's tough, they stayed in the oven too long, or something of that nature. Okay, that may be true, and that might be what you could say at home or with friends, but remember, you're there for an interview. Now, one of the things I want to mention to you is when you're ordering at a restaurant, the restaurant may serve things a certain way. We chose this particular menu today because it's something kind of similar that you might have at an awards luncheon, or it might be at a dinner that they would sponsor. So this has a little bit of a sauce on it. If you have a dietary reason to need to have something different without sauce, for instance, if you're allergic to a particular herb or something like that, then try to let your host know, maybe in a nice way. One of the things you can also do, if you see that it has sauce, you can ask if they can supply you with one that doesn't have sauce. I wouldn't do that unless you have a true allergy to that. You don't want to pull attention to yourself unless it's a real necessity. When you're between bites eating American style, and we are going to just focus on American style, then make sure your knife rests at the top in between bites, and take some time to actually put your fork down at the 10-20 point and make sure that you're having some conversation. If you go to a study abroad trip, which I encourage you to do, one of the things you might find is, particularly in Europe, they linger over their meals, and when they see some of us eating, they think, guys, slow down, enjoy, it's an experience, and we're just kind of doing just like this. So stop, put your utensils down, and just have a conversation with the people that you're there. If you are eating and someone asks you a question, don't think they want an immediate answer if you have food in your mouth. They will wait, and you can say something like, make a little gesture that you're chewing, but certainly if you have food in your mouth, refrain from that desire to answer them quickly. So during the meal, a couple of things. You might get asked to pass someone the salt. When you do, you pass the salt and the pepper together. Pretend they are married and they go together, okay? And so you pass them together. If someone asks you to pass the sweet and low, if you're at a circular or a round table setting like this, whoever is closest to it should get it and pass it. If you're passing the rolls around, one of the things you do is you go ahead and start it. You wait and take it at the end, and so that you are being polite with that standpoint. If someone has a unique way of eating something, you don't want to pull attention to it. Jacqueline Kennedy, when she was in the White House, once was entertaining at a state dinner, and they had finger bowls. If you don't know what a finger bowl is, it's something where you actually just kind of wash your fingertips in between maybe one of the courses. And this fellow from another country thought that was to drink, and so he actually picked his finger bowl up and drank it. And she was such a gracious hostess that she actually did the same thing so that she would make him feel comfortable. So you don't want to pull attention to anyone. Let's talk a little bit about ordering at a restaurant, and then we're going to have some questions from the floor in just a moment. One other quick thing while I remember, when you go out with your family or your friends, it's kind of fun to taste someone else's food. We kind of do that. We'll say, oh, why don't you order this and I'll have a bite so I'll know for next time. Resist the urge to take your fork over to someone else's plate, okay? That is not the time to do it. Just see if they enjoy it and you can get it next time, okay? So resist that urge. The other thing that you want to do is, and I have actually worked with folks. In fact, Mr. Nichols and I worked for a company one time that we had some very talented folks in the organization, but they went out a lot on expense accounts with some of our customers, and they enjoyed their meal. They really enjoyed their meal, to the point that sometimes they began ordering 2 entrees because they said, you know, we're on an expense account, why not? And so that became an issue, and we actually got feedback from our customers that said, could you talk to them, please? It's really not appropriate to order 2 entrees. So listen to what your host is going to order. They will often say, what would you like? If you've never been at that restaurant, you might say, what would you recommend? Or what do you like here? And that gives you an opportunity to do several things. You might see kind of the price range that they're going to order from. Just because you're at a restaurant that does surf and turf for $49.95 doesn't mean you have to order surf and turf for $49.95. There will be another opportunity to do that. Unless your host says, that's what I'm going to have, I'd suggest you do that too. And that may be perfectly fine. One of the other things that you want to do is during the meal have nice conversation. Know the company. We're going to talk about research, but be able to talk a little bit about what you've done, your research, either on their website, their annual report. You've done some Google articles that maybe have been written about the company, and so you can talk about that. One of the things, and this is actually a story about J.C. Penney many years ago, we have a tendency to want to use a lot of condiments sometimes. There are some people who can't deal with not having ketchup at every single meal and every food item. That may not be appropriate with some of the restaurants that you go to, a Crescent Club or maybe the Tower Room or somewhere like that. So one of the things you want to do is always sample before you season, which means don't just get the salt and pepper and begin to lay on the salt and pepper from that standpoint. Wait and taste the food and then ask for the salt and pepper. If you get asked to pass the cream or sugar, then certainly do so. And just remember that there is life after ketchup and ranch dressing, and you will survive. I think we've already covered this particular slide, and we won't do that. A couple of things that I think we have covered as we've gone along, and I want to make sure we have time for questions. Toothpicks are a no-no. If you really do need to use a toothpick, just go to the men's or ladies' room and use the toothpick. That's fine. Make sure that you use flatware, and that's what your utensils are actually called, will be are not put back on your tablecloth. Now, if you have finished your meal, and this sometimes happens because like in a large event like this, they don't always have time to clear your plate. So one of the things you want to do is take the fork that's at the top of your plate and pull it down to your left side, okay? That's right. And then what you want to do is swap places with your dessert and your dinner plate, and they will come and take your plate in just a moment. But part of the reason you have to do this in some cases is just because of time of the program. There you go. Okay, now, we've covered a lot of content. I want to tell you, I was very proud of you all because when you were standing in line, you all used that time to network and you were actually talking. Fabulous way to do that. There are people who actually get job leads at the salad bar at the grocery store. So make sure that you use that time. Don't feel like that you can't continue the conversation, okay? All right, Dr. Lawhead is roaming around with a microphone. Who has a question that we might want to answer? And while you're thinking of your question, just raise your hand. There are two people I did not introduce, and that's my mistake. Dr. Margaret Schultz, if you'll stand. She is one of our faculty members in the MIS and BIT area. And if you are in the IT area, you should be talking to her about our student organization, AMIS, because that's a great way to also meet employers. Dr. Bob Taylor, our beloved professor of management. He is also the MILE program. Memphis Institute of Leadership Education is a co-sponsor of the Personal Branding Conference, and he is the director of the MILE program, and some of the folks who are here today are MILE mentors. And so if you're a business student and interested in MILE, you may very well want to talk to Dr. Taylor. Okay? All right, any questions? All right, we got one right there.
Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Kare Diakon. I'm an accounting major, and my question is about the left-handed for the cutting and everything. I noticed that the American style and the European style use the right hand to cut and left hand to hold it. So I'm not comfortable cutting with my right hand. I cut with my left hand and eat with my right hand. I mean, like, is it okay to do that at a dinner or stuff like that? Or?
If your left hand is your primary hand, then yes, you need to use what is your primary or your dominant hand. That's okay. One thing I wanted you to see is, and we were talking about this just a few minutes ago, the continental or European style of dining, you want to know that that's okay because someone may be using that style and you wouldn't want to think they don't know what they're doing. But that's actually a very accepted practice, and if you're in Europe, that's how they do it. And when I went to France last summer, I had to learn how to do that so that I was blending in with their culture. Okay, another question. Okay, way back there, Yogi. Okay, Yogi, stand up, and we want to hear your name and your major, please, once you have...
Once you've finished, right?
Yes.
It's very difficult to swallow with the tie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yogesh. I go by Yogi. And my question is, like, when we are on a table with people from different nationalities and with different religious beliefs, so some things that we don't eat, like we don't eat beef, Hindus, and others, they are eating beef. So if a person is not comfortable sharing that food with others, then how can we avoid that kind of situation, and how do we say that I don't eat it without hurting their feelings?
A couple things. Number one, if it's like a buffet, then just don't choose the beef. Choose something else, even if it means that maybe you're eating all vegetables that day, and that's often the way that's kind of worked out. Number two, if they are going to pre-order for you, they're going to ask you if you have any dietary restrictions. And that's the nice way to let them know in advance, I only eat fish and chicken, or I'm a vegetarian, a vegan, or whatever. And so they know how to plan. And what I would probably do if all of that has failed and you're at plan C, one of the things you might want to do is just eat around what is offered at that point. And they may say, could I get you something else? And if so, then that's a good way to do that. Again, at an interview lunch, you will get a chance to eat again, and it may be better to try to take the most indirect route at that point. Does that make sense? Okay. Another question.
Kathy, I have a question. I don't have a habit I'm really proud of, but usually a portion of my meal ends up on me. And so I'm just going to put that out. How do you handle that properly if it happens to happen?
Well, the first thing to do, and I've eaten with Dr. Lawhead, so I kind of believe that,
Lie.
one of the things you want to try to do is prevention is always a good thing. So one thing, scoot up close to the table. You know, don't be too far away so that you've got this distance between you and the table. So be appropriately spaced. If you know that that tends to happen, one of the things that you can do is to try to make sure you take smaller bites. That's sometimes the reason we have a spill. If you do spill, and if you have anything that happens that isn't on the plan, try to minimize the attention to it. So if, let's say, it fell on Dr. Lawhead's lap and it's a small bite of chicken, he can just take his napkin and kind of put that there and hold it until it's appropriate to maybe take care of it and maybe put it on his bread and butter plate later. What you don't want to do is say, oh no, here I go again, I've dropped my chicken. And not pull any more attention to yourself. If you get something on your tie, guys, one of the things you don't do, and can you come up here and be my guinea pig here? I promise I won't hurt you. But come on up here, I want to show something. Men sometimes with ties, and particularly expensive ties, are worried about spilling things on their tie. And so one of the things that you don't want to do, I'm going to okay, all right. One of the things you don't do is when you sit down to eat, you do not put your tie over your shoulder. Now, you laugh. People do that. Mr. Nichols, have you seen people do that in your career? Okay. You don't do that. That says, I know I have a problem, okay? And you're pulling negative attention to oneself. So one of the things you want to just try to do, and the other thing that you don't do is you don't do this and put it up so that you cover that up. And even though he's got a beautiful tie, I'm up here where I can really see it's gray and blue, it's lovely. But one of the things you're going to have to try to watch and do is just watch the size of the bites you take. And if you get a little spot on it, and you know you do, unless it is just really, really distracting, I would just try to ignore it. And take care of it later when you go to the men's room. Let's give him a hand. This is an embarrassing thing to do. Okay.
Good afternoon. Whoa. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Sanders.
And where do you work, Stephen?
I work at FedEx Services. I'm a MAL alumni. I'm a University of Memphis alumni. I know we're primarily talking about interviewing, but for those here who may be currently interning somewhere or maybe in their career already, can we talk a little bit about how to handle alcohol when you're at a dinner setting, possibly at work or for an interview?
Thank you for that question. That is a great question. And I can tell you there are some companies that the use of alcohol is a part of their interview strategy, okay? So a couple things. If you don't imbibe, or number one, you need to be legal drinking age. Do not show up with a fake ID at a company event, all right? That is not cool. The second thing is if you do not drink, then that's fine. Choose another beverage. It's non-alcoholic. Don't make a big deal of that either. And I don't drink. It's a reason. I got to tell you, and you know, just don't go there.
Look at me. I don't drink.
Yeah, you know, I'm sure the rest of y'all are not going to remember tomorrow. You know, you're not going to just don't go there. If you are going to have and participate, then realize that they may be watching how you participate with that. For instance, you would not want to go to an event, and it's very common today that major companies will have events where they want to kind of observe how groups of college recruits interact with one another and how they interact with their managers, because they are anticipating that's how they would interact as employees. So if they give you a little chance to go to an open bar, that does not mean go and get drunk. It doesn't. It may be, it doesn't cost you anything certainly, but take one drink, nurse that all night long perhaps, or realize that it could loosen, alcohol just loosens our inhibitions, and we might say or do something that's you're not going to want to be remembered for. I have one student who came up to me and told me a story about one of our students who didn't use that advice and actually did not have an appropriate interview experience because of it. So use alcohol very sparingly. If you don't handle alcohol well, that is not the time to try it. And so I would choose that. But realize there is a reason it's there. And they may be trying to see if you use good judgment with your alcohol. Is that what you're talking about? Have you seen some? I have. Okay, you want to give us an example with no names?
Sure.
Okay, can you stand up so they can see you?
Sure. So we have a lot of social outings at FedEx, and so especially around the holidays, we'll have parties at maybe one of our director or VP's houses, and so I've seen, managers, directors come into, the party, and they look like themselves, but after about 30 to 45 minutes, they're not themselves. I've been hugged and kissed inappropriately. It happens, and it's because they've drunken too much. And even in social settings like that, you want to be careful. I mean, yeah, we're at someone's house, it's the holidays, we're having a good time, but people remember those things, and you don't want that reputation.
Well, and one of the things, remember that what got you here may not keep you here. And so let's say your internship does what we hope it will do and you get a full-time position. Just because you got the full-time position doesn't mean that you will keep it if you don't use good judgment. Good judgment is important. I just recently read an article, and it was an obituary. And the obituary was about the loss and the passing of common sense, and that people had lost their common sense. So think about that. Think about why you're here. Everything we've talked about today is about thinking about things a little bit differently, not necessarily doing what's in the moment. All right, another question. We want Dr. Lawhead to run off his lunch, so ask questions. All right, way over there.
Hello, my name is Brittany Jackson. I'm a graduate student here at the university. I have a question in regard to holding maybe a drink and a hors d'oeuvre plate at a networking event. Can you tell us a little bit about how to handle that in that setting, as well as greeting somebody and shaking their hand?
Some of this depends on what type of glass you actually have. If you have a small wine glass, and you have the appropriate size plate, which my props aren't exactly right for this, so pretend a little bit. But if my plate were a little larger, I can actually and my wine glass is the right size, I can actually hold my wine glass with my thumb right here, and that leaves my right hand free. Or if I were left-handed, I'd do the opposite. Okay? So that's one way to do it. Now, to do that, you cannot pile your hors d'oeuvre plate to be this tall. None of your plates, when you are choosing full, should be tall plates. All right, appropriate portion control. But let's say that you have chosen a few items and your glass is an appropriate size. You can do it this way. Another good way to do that is to have just a few items, and maybe if you are stationed somewhere while you are eating, kind of close to where you can put your drink right here and stand by it. Do not leave your drink and come back to it. And there are many reasons for that, but I won't go into all of those, but don't leave your drink. But if you're right here where you can monitor, it's fine. The other thing to do is to, if you are really in there to network, take just a few items here and talk, eat what you're going to eat, put your plate down, and then go get something to drink, and only hold the beverage, and then you'll have your hand free to shake hands. Does that make sense? Okay. Some of this, if you're at an event where they have the really huge wine glasses, it would topple over. So you have to kind of use some judgment when you see what your actual plates and glasses are. Okay, other questions? Okay, Caesar?
My name is Cesar Lomo, studying finance as a junior. And my question is, oftentimes I'd go to dinners and maybe they're serving steak, and I might have ordered the wrong kind, so I'm not able to chew it properly. What's a more discreet way to dispose of that?
You mean they have not cooked it enough, or?
Yes. I'm always confused with the terms medium rare, well done, all of that. So.
Do they normally not cook it enough for you?
I'm guessing so, yes.
Okay. Then one thing you might want to do, here's what this means. Rare is going to be very, very red, and it's going to be a cold center, okay? Medium rare is just a step up from that, and it's going to be pretty rare still. If you don't like a cold meat in your mouth, then don't order medium rare. Medium tends to be just a warm pink center. Medium well is pretty well done with just a teeny type of pink. I might order a step up. That'll be the first thing that you can do. The other thing, again, kind of bottom line rule, is you want to cause as little negative attention to yourself as possible. And if it's a really important interview lunch, what you may want to do is cut around the other parts of the steak and eat those, and then just kind of leave that part there. If you don't, when you cut into it, if it looks like it's too much, unless your host says, is that okay, then I would just try to eat around it as much as possible. Oh, you've had it in your mouth. Oh, okay. Well, remember, what we don't want to do is we don't want to put chewed up food. And if you, please eat your dessert. If y'all are waiting for me to tell you to eat your dessert, you may eat your dessert. Thank you for waiting. What I would probably do, Caesar, on that one is I would say, excuse me, I will be back in just a few minutes. Go to the men's room, get rid of it. You don't want to put any chewed up food in your napkin, because then you're not going to be able to use your napkin. Okay? One quick thing, some of you waited. When do you begin eating at a dinner? When your host begins eating, okay? So even though everybody's there, whoever has invited you there, when they begin to eat, that's when you should eat, okay? All right, other questions? All right, I'm gonna cover a couple of things, and that might have a couple of questions for you. On the desserts, the way this was, one of the things that you may wanna do is don't get too worked up in the choices. A couple of years ago, we had a student who really liked this strawberry shortcake. I mean, and he wanted everybody's strawberry shortcake that didn't eat it. And we were trying to say, okay, the whole idea of what we're doing here is we're trying to apply what we would do in a real situation. So if you were with an employer you're hoping that will hire you, would you ask for 3 pieces of strawberry shortcake? Probably not. If you're with grandma who's taking you out for your birthday dinner, that's a different story, all right? So think about that. Don't and I've seen folks do this who honestly have had quite a bit of experience. If you get to the table and you're trying to make sure that you get the chocolate cake, and so just, realize that you will eat cake again. Everything that you are doing is about respect and connections and relationships, so recognize that. A couple things back to the alcohol. Remember that over a dinner, you are still being interviewed. They may not be asking you the same type of questions that they ask you in a typical interview setting, but you are being interviewed one way or the other in the way that you simply converse, because communication is important, and particularly in the type of position that you have. They may be expecting you to converse with their clients or their customers. So they want to make sure that you have that kind of opportunity and skills to do that. One of the things that, because it does kind of inhibit us or lose our inhibitions rather, then it may cause you to answer questions differently than you would want. So watch that. The cell phone. Make sure that you turn your cell phone off before you start a meal, an employer type meal. And the reason for that is it is considered rude to be texting while you're at a dinner table anyway. And so, particularly in a fine restaurant, and most of the time when they take you to an interview lunch, it's a nice restaurant, so they're kind of putting out some nice money. So you want to make sure that you are aware of that. Don't text, put your cell phone on silent, or you've got somebody in the ICU or something of that nature, and then tell them on the front end, I may have to respond to a doctor's call, and I apologize in advance, but it's unavoidable. And then they will know that. We actually had a professor in the business school who he's a lawyer by education, and one of the law school graduates went out to lunch with a managing partner of a major law firm and had his cell phone out so frequently, responded to 3 texts during the lunch interview to which he was about to get a job offer. After the 3rd text, the hiring manager stood up and said, you know what, here's $300. This is going to cover our meal. I wish you well. And he lost the opportunity for that job, all because of the use of cell phones. So turn that off. Table conversation. What are some of the things that you all have talked about at your tables? Sports, okay, that's a safe one, unless you food, okay. What are some things you want to avoid as topics? Religion, politics. It's kind of hard with the politics, the way the debates are going right now, but try to avoid that. All right, anything that's questionable or conflict-ridden, try to make sure that you use courtesy titles. And in today's corporate world, it's very, a little bit on the laid-back style, but until they say, please call me John or please call me Mary, use a courtesy title. In healthcare, the courtesy titles are very important, and in higher education, they tend to be very important. So I've actually had some faculty approach me and say, would you tell them not to call their professors by their first name? And it's just something that is a generational thing, I believe. If there's an awkward silence, a little bit of that is okay. Be mentally prepared. You don't want to be pulling out these portfolios going, oh yes, here's my list of questions. But be prepared enough for that you can say, I was looking at your website the other day and I saw that you had a new product line. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So that gets into that opportunity. Another question? Okay. Any questions about etiquette? Because I think I'm going to flip over to getting you prepared for the interview. First of all, before we do this, because we always want to know if this is helpful, was this experience helpful to you? Okay. Did you learn something you didn't know?
And I know you're clapping for the process itself, but let's just really thank Dr. Tuberville and her expressing all of her knowledge.